update should be going out to everybody just to let them know. We will definitely be getting that recording to everybody and parsing this out in a way that makes sense. And again, I do apologize for that error. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The great tech debate. Should we buy software or should we leave it alone? Let's take a look and see who our wonderful panelists are today. Welcome to this exciting discussion. I'm going to let the experts here introduce themselves, and then we're going to launch into some conversations and topics specifically around their tech stacks and around their experiences with proposal management software. So Lauren, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Styczynski. I am the Associate Proposals Manager at Cogstate. Cogstate provides clinical testing services to pharmaceutical companies. So I basically write proposals to pharma companies and kind of in the biotech sector. But my past experience has been all throughout all of the things, both federal, public, and private. So happy to answer any questions and chat today.
And Lauren, you are relatively new to the proposal industry, right? Just a couple of years in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the proposals world for about 2 years now.
Excellent. Well, we're happy to see you here. We always love having those fresh faces and new voices in the space. So thank you for sharing your opinion with us today. All right, Victoria.
Hi, I'm Vicky Allison. I am the Director of Capture and Proposal Management for Isobar Public Sector. I've been in proposal management for 12 years, mainly in the federal space.
Excellent. Thank you. And Bill?
Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Gregoire, Senior Proposal Manager at IAP Worldwide Services. We're a defense contractor. Let's see, I've been doing proposals for over 15 years now. I've been in both federal and non-federal, different industries, and looking forward to this talk today.
Thanks. All right, and Graham, take us home.
Hi, everyone. Graham Rotelli, the Director of Bids and Proposals over at Seismic. We are a sales enablement company, and I've been in the proposal space for about 14 years, mainly B2B, did some federal and SMB and things like that for a little bit, but mainly focused in the technology space, but really excited to talk to everybody and think it's gonna be fun.
Excellent. We have a really wide range of experience levels here, a bunch of different industries that are represented, which is why I think we have a really great opportunity to have a deep discussion about this today, because your software choices are definitely going to depend on your industry and the experience you have with those documents. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to talk about today is, number one, we're going to talk about who's familiar with which software tools, because you know there are a bunch of different options out there, not only for proposal automation, but also for data management, for your content management, for delivering and executing on design principles. So let's talk a little bit about the tech stacks that we've all experienced, we all know about, and then we're going to talk about what you're using today. So what are the systems that these folks have on board? What do they love about them? What do they have complaints about? And then maybe we're going to, for number three, we're going to talk about love it or lose it. How do we feel about proposal automation tools? What are the great benefits? What are the drawbacks? And where do we see some opportunities for those companies to maybe make a difference in our lives? And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about where we think the industry is moving, because we are hearing little rumblings about AI being a thing, and everybody's got some interesting opinions about that. So maybe we'll toss that out to our experts as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Number one, getting to know you. What does our experience look like? So I'm just going to switch over to the cameras right now, and we'll just talk about what the experience looks like that we all have with the different tech stacks and programs that we use. And let's just go in the order that we did for the intros. So Lauren, if you want to kick us off, what programs do you have experience with?
Sure. So with regards to kind of proposal software and proposal automation, I've worked with Lupio, I've worked with Qvidian, and then I've dabbled a little bit with RFPIO, but I'm currently using Qvidian, so spoiler alert. And then kind of with regards to kind of what my processes look like and kind of what technology I'm using in my day-to-day, it's a lot of Microsoft Teams, a lot of Microsoft Word, and living, eating, and breathing in the Microsoft suite. But that being said, I've worked kind of with the Google suite and kind of just all that going. I use Salesforce quite a bit, which might be a little out of the ordinary. I don't know what other people use. But yeah, that's pretty much what I'm using on the daily to get my job done. That being said, I've worked all within the Adobe world, the Photoshop, that sort of thing when it requires it, but it's not kind of my day to day.
You're muted, or at least I'm muted, Ben.
I can't hear.
It's me. That was me. Sorry. Thank you. Well, that was great. Okay, so we're talking about CRMs, we're talking about automation tools, and we're talking about content management and design tools. So you've got an experience with this wide range, this wide kind of spectrum of tech tools that you use in your life, with a heavy focus on Microsoft. Vicky, does that line up with what you've used in the past, or what does your experience look like with that?
It's almost exactly. So when I was a baby proposal manager doing state, we did the Qvidian quite a bit, mainly because a lot of those are plug and play. And so those can help a lot with this, like a more local feel. But, because federal is so diverse and each agency has their own kind of methodology for it, we typically only stay within the Microsoft suite. And I have Adobe Pro on my end to do all of the editing and PDFing and things like that for production wise. Now we don't usually do production at Kinko's anymore, but we used to. But mostly now it's Adobe Suite and Microsoft heavy. I do for capture and sales, we do use Salesforce. That is big and heavy in our organization as well.
Okay, I'm curious, and I think this is something that we're going to want to touch on later in a little bit more detail, about the difference between like the types of proposals that Lauren's doing, the types of proposals Vicky is doing, and then those that we'll also hear from Bill and Graham, because I can tell you right now that I'm hearing different needs and requirements kind of emerging even as we're having this conversation. So this is something to put a pin in. Bill, what about you? What's your background? Like, what does your tech stack look like that you've used in the past?
Well, currently, it's about the same as Vicky's right now for federal. It's very, very much Microsoft Word and PDF. Let's see, we're experimenting with Visible Thread right now. I think it's PT Docs is the specific one. We just had some training on that. But in my non-federal world, I've used let's see, Ombud, Qvidian. What else? Some that I forgot about, probably. RFPIO, I believe I've used.
Okay.
360, I think, as well.
Okay.
And yeah, like I said, another like one or two that I've forgotten about. And in the past I've used InDesign. I've used been InDesign, Photoshop, Illustrator. Those are the big ones. And
Anybody
then of course,
here?
Teams, not Teams, Teams and SharePoint.
Do y'all remember Quark? Anybody
Oh,
dates
yes, I
back
used
to
to use Quark.
Quark?
Yep.
Back in the late 90s. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Quark was the thing. It was that and InDesign that were kind of in a battle for the production documentation. So yeah, that's great.
PageMaker was one of them too.
Yep. RFP, Ben asks about RFP Monkey or Salesforce CPQ. I remember RFP Monkey, but I don't think that's super common. No.
I don't remember RFP Monkey. Salesforce CPQ, I thought that was more from a commercial pricing perspective. Mostly utilized.
Graham, let's round it out. What's your experience and knowledge? Like what platforms have you been involved with?
I mean, I would say probably all of the above, what everybody said. Salesforce is a big player in what we do right now. We use Lupio currently. I've used RFPIO. Chorus was one. I don't think that's been mentioned yet. In the old school days before they were acquired, we used Savo as well as PMAPs. I used PMAPs at CDW a long time ago, but I think they're long gone. So it's interesting to see how they all evolve. But we use InDesign for production, executive summaries to make them more like a magazine, more visually appealing. and yeah, just Microsoft Suite and other things like that, but a whole host of things.
Okay. You know, in talking about this, we already kind of talked about number 2 there, which is our current tech stack. So what I kind of want to do is blast past number 2, because we can talk, really what we wanted to do here was showcase to you that everybody on this panel has probably, at least one person here has interacted with, used, or been a fan of, or a strong advocate of one of these platforms, right? So I'm curious, like, we just wanted to describe the depth of that experience and showcase really these people are big time experts in understanding these systems. One thing that I'm really curious about when it comes to working with different types of RFPs, let's dive a little bit into what the requirements might look like and the reasons we choose certain softwares, and then we can talk a little bit about what we love and what we don't love. One thing that kind of emerged for me, specifically with Victoria and Bill, is talking about in the federal space, those security requirements that come along with, like, because for instance, we're not allowed to use Slack in certain contexts because there's a security question there. So when specifically for Vicky and Bill, are there thoughts and considerations about using specific software based on like national security and secrets?
I would, for me personally, no. It's not a security issue to use the software automation tools, or a Lupio, for instance. I've worked with that in the past recently. It's more of, because each RFQ or RFP and or RFI are so different in what they ask for and what they're looking for specifically, it's harder to use the automation software, in my perspective, answering those questions when I have to search for it anyway. So if I'm going to use Lupio, it's great for like a plug and play or RFPs that are very similar in nature. So say you only work in one agency, like the DOJ. The FBI has a very distinct way of how they want their proposals done, and usually they're all the same. Actually, to your point specifically, the FBI does require a security volume with a lot of their submissions. And you will need social security numbers and a lot of very PII information about the people in your company. So I wouldn't necessarily use software for that personally. For me, in gathering that information, it would go against our protocols security-wise to use that and hold that information in there. But again, the FBI is completely different than the ATF and how they do their proposals, or some of the GSA. The use of that for the federal kind of RFPs and how we do those is all over the board, all over the gamut, and what they're asking for is completely different. So a lot of times for me, it's more of a hassle to use automation tools than me just having it readily available for me personally on my hard drive.
Okay. All right.
I'll ask a question, Vicky, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
In the past, so when I worked for Hitachi Vantara, we had a separate federal team that had to have their own secure databases, their own secure servers and everything else. And we couldn't see anything that they were doing, but they were still allowed to use, we were using Chorus at that point. They were still allowed to use Chorus, but it was restricted from an internal perspective. Have you seen?
Ours are too. Mm-hmm.
Okay. You've seen that in your experience as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So right now, the company I'm working for is Isobar Public Sector. We are a public off the brand of a giant umbrella of companies, which means that we have in place a FOCI, which is an organizational kind of wall that we have set up that when we get audited, we have to present a lot of external controls and internal controls saying that we are secure outside to the outside organizations in our company. So we have our own servers, we have our own software, we have everything that is completely separate than any other entity that is owned by the Dentsu brand. And then if I have to speak to someone, like, for instance, Merkle is a company within our brand. If I am working on a bid and I have questions for someone in Merkle, or they need something from me, I have to submit organizational claims saying that I spoke to them about this only, and get that approved by our security officers.
I think it's really interesting and important to think about the context when we're purchasing software. And so just to give everybody kind of like a preview or a checklist, sometimes some things that I'm thinking about when I go to purchase software are what's my security posture, how many people need access to this, right? Like what type of information is going to be stored in there. So based on that, we have lots of different perspectives here. Are there any other like big key decision-making factors at the beginning of your process or related to the nature of your business that might change the way you think about software? And Graham, you came off of mute, so I don't know if that's
Yeah.
something you want to weigh in on.
I was going to say it really depends on the landscape of the company, because with most of the software tools, there's some type of knowledge library that needs maintenance. And if you either don't have a knowledge manager that can help keep that up to date, or the business for some reason just doesn't support it or doesn't want to put in the extra time to make sure that that content is current, then to me, putting a solution in place is only going to cause you headaches. You're going to have sales reps saying, hey, this is 6 months old. Why would I use this? I can just go out to so-and-so and he'll get back to me in 10 minutes. So I think if the business is accepting of it and they can understand what their return on investment is versus the time that they're putting into it is, I think that's a big consideration.
Any other big decision-making points that we might have?
I think for me, it's really about who is going to be in that software. Because as I sit now, I'm still, like I said, I'm using Qvidian. I'm using Qvidian to get me 80% of the way there, but I'm still at the end of the day going to pop out probably a Word document and circulate it via email for review to all of our SMEs. Mostly because one, I don't really want to teach them a new software. And two, I know they're not going to want to learn the new software when I can open up this Word document, pop in some comments and some track changes, and that takes me 10 minutes. You know what I mean? So I think for me, it's not only like, do I have the licenses available, but also like, who's going to be in it, who's going to be accessing it. And in Qvidian right now, it's really me and a couple other people on my proposals team, and that's about it.
Can y'all say a little bit more about getting people to adopt software and the challenges that come along with that? And then we'll dive into the feature sets that either we love or we hate. Bill, you came off of mute. What do you think? What do you think about getting SMEs involved in new software?
So yeah, that's the fun part. Getting them to do something new, something that's not something they've been doing for many years can be very tough. The way to do it is definitely find something that's fairly easy to use, because most of your SMEs, its proposals are not their day job. Like it's ours. Theirs is either billable time, it can be running programs, projects, what have you. So that's the thing. It's got to be simple. It's got to be easy to use, and it's got to give them what they want right away. That's generally the consideration that you need.
So what's it like when we have great SME buy-in, and what's it like when we don't? Anybody have good stories, like battle stories?
Yeah, so our last company, we had about 1,400 SMEs that we wanted to get involved. And like Bill had mentioned, if the process is complex, doesn't matter how much time they think they're going to save, they're not going to do it. And that's what ended up happening. That was the ultimate downfall to not having our content renewed. At Seismic right now, we're going through this process. It's new to the business. And we've been able to tell them, we've been able to give them a guideline to say, here's what we're going to expect over the next 6 months. There's going to be some, work up front. It's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. You have these 3 people that you can reach out to. Feel free to do that whenever you want. But after that, you're going to start seeing those questions start to become a bit more a part of your day, as well as you can now tell sales reps or anybody else internally, go use the tool, as opposed to them coming to you to answer the question that you've answered 15 times over the past 2 months. So we try and position that, because everybody gets repeats as a subject matter expert, and it can be very frustrating, especially if you're working on a deadline driven thing. And so we say, you can work on the stuff that that's going to make a difference for the company, as opposed to repeating yourself 10 more times.
Great. Man, I love hearing good stories about SMEs being able to realize that time savings, because a lot of these tools have the capabilities to do that. But what I'm hearing a lot from y'all, and what I've heard over the years, is if you don't have the process built, if you bring in a tool and you hope that it's going to save everything, you're not going to be satisfied. Right? Like the tool itself is just a hammer, right? If you don't know how to use the hammer, or if you don't know how to use a nail gun, you're gonna have a bad time. All right, so let's take a look real quick. Let's skip here. I'm just gonna show the title card for this for oh, excuse me. I'm going to share the title screen here for our number 3 topic, which is what we love. So what are the aspects of the systems that we use that have helped us in the past? And this can be, again, InDesign, Qvidian, Chorus, Lupio, RFPIO, like whatever it is. If there's a tech system that you love that has helped you move your career forward, helped you move your team forward, let's talk about those.
I gotta tell you, the one thing that I have loved to see over the years, so Microsoft Online, the Office built in the internet, the app is like not the greatest, right? Especially when you're collaborating and you're trying to get all of these people to kind of write in the same document. The team, for us, what we're using right now is the Teams collaboration tool. So I've built up a channel for all of our active proposals right now, or a team for all of our active proposals. And then I add people collectively to work on a proposal in a channel. And then I put all the solicitation documents in there. And then I built out the templates and everything else, and then we can collaborate that way. And I've got to tell you, rather than spending, an hour trying to consolidate and combine people's kind of content into one document and send it out for review and then come back and consolidate again, this has saved so much time on a proposal management side. I mean, it's not perfect, right? I always tell people, please download this document onto your drive and work that way, because you just can't do it online. Like, it's just going to not save your stuff, or it's formatting weird. Like, it always turns things into like web dings, and it changes the font on you all the time. So it's not perfect, but for a collaboration point in proposals, that has really helped tremendously from a time aspect for us personally.
And Vicky, what was that again?
To the Teams collaboration tool, Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, Teams we used in the past. The two, I really liked it as well, Vicky. I think it's definitely got a really good backbone. The two issues we ran into was any channel that was set up, you're only allowed to have 200 projects or 200 groups underneath that. So we had to keep creating new channels for individuals, and that became a little bit of a pain. So I think that's just a Microsoft, hey, let's correct it one of these days. Maybe they hear this recording and decide to change things. Who knows?
That is a headache for us. Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing about Teams that we struggled with was, again, like you mentioned, working in Microsoft Online, you have a greatly reduced set of abilities to edit fonts, to create comments, and things like that. And it makes the document look a little wonky. And it's okay to download it, but we had issues when SharePoint's going through an update or something else. You would download it,
right,
and then all of a sudden you're like, what's that? That's not what I did. So I think it's definitely got its pros and cons, but from a simplicity, and most organizations have the Microsoft suite, I think that's a really good first step.
Now, Graham, I know that you and I have talked a lot about, obviously as advocates for Lupio, like me formally, and you also as a key member there. What is it about that type of automation software that really does it for your team?
The piece that I really enjoy about Lupio the most is the ability for the tool to automatically digest a document. It's easy for us to, as my team as proposal managers, they can upload a document, mark sections, subsections, and questions, and create assignments within 30 minutes, even if there's 300 questions. It actually does that very, very well. And I think a lot of the tools that have that ability to recognize text can do that very well. The only places I see from my perspective where Lupio falls a little bit short is when we want to start going through the export process. We've had a little bit of trouble keeping it within style guides and things like that. I think it's a temporary fix that they're working on, but other than that, it's a pretty solid tool to recognize what is where, be able to track who's reviewing, and even make assignments, which is really helpful, make assignments to other people within the organization. They just get a simple email. So they don't even have to have a license, which is very helpful. We keep it very small. We only have about 30 licenses, and we have, 300 people that are answering questions for us. So there's some pros there as well.
Yes, to Sam's question, I do actually.
Yep.
I
Yeah, so Sam,
That's a federal thing. So we're B2B. So the majority of what I do and any advice or guidance or comments that I give on this is really strictly from a B2B perspective. I've been in the federal space. I do not envy you guys. It's kind of complex. You have subheadings that never end. So
4.1.1.2.1. Yeah.
yeah, and just for everybody watching this recording, what Sam Weaver just asked was whether Lupio's limits on subheading levels was a disadvantage, and that's why Sam decided to go with RFPIO for their system at that company. So that was the question that was asked. Absolutely. RFPIO, you can do unlimited levels of subheading, right?
you can. Yeah, from when I last used it, you could. I think they're different from a pricing model perspective because they're per project, which is very nice because you get unlimited licenses for everybody. But if you don't have a good grasp on what your proposal team is going to manage throughout the year, it can become very expensive.
Yeah, that's a big part of what we've got to consider here too, is the licensing costs for these and like how what you're able to predict when you go into buying software. Lauren, I saw you nodding really enthusiastically when Graham was talking about setting up the document for import and being able to structure that. Can you tell us how that's worked for you?
Yeah, so that's kind of where I really miss working with Lupio, especially with regards to kind of information security, due diligence questionnaires, vendor questionnaires, which in my world right now is a lot of taking our quality assurance team and having them really go wild over 50 questions. Before, Lupio was fantastic at that. It was really great at, these are the questions, column B is where the answers are going to go. It was fantastic. When I jumped ship, I pretty much had no software. I had a messy Excel file, and I was like, oh my goodness, I miss Lupio so much because it was so great at that specifically. And then when, Qvidian kind of came into the picture, and I was kind of getting it up and running, I had to reformat all these things, plug it in their style guide to then re-upload it, and maybe it would get you the answer in the right spot, or it would help you kind of find the answer that you were actually looking for. And so far, I just found it isn't as intuitive as I think it could be. So I really miss Lupio from that perspective. And so I've actually found myself kind of having to go back to my old Excel sheet, go back to kind of the old RFPs when we get those very heavy due diligence questionnaires, which aren't very often in my world, for what it's worth, but I miss it from that perspective.
Lauren, can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
Do you think from an answer perspective, the reason that Qvidian struggles is there aren't enough ways to differentiate the content that you have so it knows what to put where or what to suggest?
Yeah, I would say so. I think they're kind of, I think where Qvidian really falls short is that like running magic tool. And I think Lupio was pretty good about it. And just for basic stuff, right? Like your address, the company address. You would think you could probably figure that out. Not always.
The secret.
And so, yeah, right. I know that's like the one thing that I've just absolutely struggled with. And I think perhaps that might be it.
I think a big piece that we learned, we ran a large proposal to evaluate all of these companies, and Qvidian was bought by Upland, a number of years ago, whatever it was. What's interesting is Upland has, I think, well over 1,000 people or so or more in that business. It's a pretty big business, but they only have 80 people or so dedicated to Qvidian. So it does kind of show right now, it doesn't seem like they're currently heavily invested in that tool. from an R&D perspective and how they want to develop it based on user experience. But it is more cost effective compared to Loopio and RFPIO, which are a little bit stronger.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think Qvidian is great in how we've currently set it up. And so I have it both kind of as a proactive proposal situation, that I can actually build out a draft proposal, which is really great. And I can import a whole bunch of information directly from Salesforce. So directly from our sales team, putting in information, which is great and saves me a ton of time. But that being said, I think there's, a final push and we're not quite there yet. And I think if I had different software on my team, I think that would be helpful.
I'm really particularly interested in this theme of like being able to import, because Ben and I have been talking about this for a long time, because there's some new tools that are emerging, like Scion Analytics, Deep RFP, that are helping to shred at the beginning of the document for federal teams. And Bill, it sounds like you're using Visible Thread for that. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with that and like how you feel about it, whether or not it's going well?
Well, right now, the visible thread is we're just in the testing mode of it, just see, hey, is this going to work well for us? I have used, what is that? It used to be a Tebion, if I'm pronouncing it right. It was good. It was good. It was a shredder, basically. And that's what visible thread is too. It's a shredder. It seems to work pretty well as far as, and it gets your compliance matrix set up for you. As far as getting documents set up for you, that's a different story. I found that I really have to set up documents in the federal world manually, just to make sure to ensure that you're compliant, and base them off your compliance matrix, but you need to really have that RFP right there in front of you and your Word document there to get the time right. Because there's so much detail in there.
Yeah. There's these kind of levels of RFPs that we see, like the real quick, snappy ones that go to your municipal and like education agencies, the real quick, snappy ones that go to B2B, right? And I think that's really where, like, we use RFPIO right now at the company that I'm at. I think it really shines in that perspective. Like, look, this is a repeatable piece of content. We're really easy. We're really used to using this a lot of the times. We can predict what's going to be in the RFP, and we can easily parse through it. But as the complexity of that RFP starts to increase, now these tools either become only relevant in a small context, or they just don't seem to work at all. So I think that's really important for us to understand the difference between shredding at the beginning, completing the document, maintaining content. Like, those are all different functionalities. Vicky, I see you nodding your head. Where do you think those really big challenges come in? Because I know you had some strong opinions about like how this works with federal.
I do. So I was on a proposal recently, and they were using, the company that we were teaming with was using Loopio. And I think it's great to have a tool that can build an outline right for you, and import a lot of we call it standard boilerplate content, like who you are and things like that. But me personally, I am too type A to use any kind of tool for compliance. I feel like it's gonna, especially in the federal world, might miss something that is, knock you out immediately. So I think Loopio was great in kind of setting up the document for an outline. But what I didn't love is, I am not a person that just, because these are so unique to each agency and environment and mission, to use it just for standard content is only going to do maybe 10 to 15% of the proposal itself. For us specifically, there's a lot of approach and methodologies and a lot of new written content that needs to be developed with your subject matter experts that can't really be captured in Loopio. So being dependent on something like that in a proposal shop for the federal sector, it doesn't hold any weight for me personally.
Got it. Let's transition, because we've kind of figured out what we love about these RFP software tools. Let's take a look, and let's skip to this next section: top gripes and problems where our systems may collapse. Because I feel like this is where we're gonna have a lot of fun, right? Because I can go all day. I can go all day and like not even be biased about like what the problems are with all the different ones. So so we talked about the fact that we love that we can get an outline built. We love that we in some context, right? We love that we can connect with our subject matter experts. We love that we can maybe set up these routine content screenings to make sure the information we're pulling is like frequently reviewed and is correct, per Graham's point, to say like, okay, we have a reliable content repository, but like, where are we all struggling and sad? what's because like Graham, it looked like you were like you had some thoughts there in the chat, and I would love to hear more about you know, some of the challenges you faced.
Yeah, and this kind of piggybacks on Sam had put in the chat, how effective are different tools when it comes to project management, automation, reviews, reminders. I think when you evaluate who your team is, you can see from the experts on this call, we all do proposals in a different way. So I think the first step, even before you even want to consider software, is to understand how your business successfully runs proposals. And then are there any of those major areas that are big time sucks for you guys where you're just like, oh my God, it takes us 45 minutes to digest the document or 3 hours to digest the document, and we need to do it in 15. Good, well, make that a consideration. My big gripe with all of these tools, and it may not be exactly a functionality of the tool, but it's more the sales methodology behind why these companies want to sell you their software. It's almost consistently across the board. Everybody likes to talk about how much time you're going to save and the ability to do that many more RFPs. And I think there is a time and a place for that, but it's grossly overestimated. There is so much of a human element that comes into proposals. It's my favorite thing about RFPs. I love executive summaries. There's not going to be a tool out there that's going to write an executive summary for me. I like understanding who the customer is, what their pain points are, and writing something that's compelling, interesting, and fun so they can read it and go, this is pretty neat. I want to have more of a conversation. So I think if you put it in that perspective, every time I've reached out for a new tool or talked to a company to say, hey, we're not getting as good of a usage out of this or whatever else, it's always about, we can make you do this faster and this 60% more efficient and this 90% more efficient. It's like, but that's not what I need. And I don't think there's ever going to be a tool that really replaces the human element. And it's a shout out to all of them. They kind of need to understand that first and then say, what do you specifically need that we can help automate, not necessarily replace or make 90% faster.
Yeah, I think there's a real risk when we use that language around like, let's produce 40% more RFPs. And does that actually line up with our business strategy? Should we be doing more work? It's a bold assumption, right? We may not need to do more work. We may need to do it better.
Right.
Yeah. And Sam over in the comments says no in big letters. We'll go over here to Lauren really quickly too. What are some of the challenges that you're facing in your methodology or your approach with some of the software tools that you're involved with right now?
Yeah, so I think I kind of set an interesting point because I am writing these mostly to pharmaceutical companies, and every project that we take on, there really is no like standard. There's no real standard process. And actually, I was in a meeting this morning discussing, how can we make our process more efficient, right? How can we make it better? Who are the key players? Who do we want to take out of the process? Where are our bottlenecks? Because our process is very, everyone touches it. It's very human-centered. I get my inputs and kind of my SME, their inputs to me are actually in the form of spreadsheets, which is kind of interesting. And so not very normal. And I think for me, kind of where that software, like where software comes into it, it's not necessarily getting faster or better. It gets me like 80% of the way, but I was kind of already 80% of the way to begin with. I don't know. So yeah, it's kind of a weird, like I sit in a very weird spot. I don't know. And like, I understand the federal space, but that's not where I'm in. And I think because I'm in kind of that more B2B world, and I'm in a weird situation where sometimes people just want to see a paragraph and a budget number, and sometimes people want to see a 17-page document. And there's a time and place for both, but both still has to undergo the full process. So
Lauren, you've used both software that involves Q&A pairs and full documents. Which of those, in your experience, does it depend on the industry if it's a better fit? Like, what's your experience been with those kind of contrasted formats?
yeah, I would say, and I think Vicky alluded to this, if as well as Graham, if you're gonna sit down and write a compelling executive summary, you're not going to do that in a software. And I think it really depends kind of on your industry, where I complete a security questionnaire, kind of a vendor survey, maybe one a month. Is that worth it to buy the software? Probably not. If that were my main sort of area of expertise and I was getting 4 a week, absolutely I'm going to buy the software to kind of that plug and play and not go. But if I'm going to sit down and write something compelling, as Graham mentioned, you're not going to do that in software.
Yeah, I agree. Bill, what are you struggling with right now? Like, where does your software kind of falling short?
It's it's just the same as the federal, as Vicky's federal problem. It just can't answer every question, and it's not really like they are questions. It's just they're saying, you have a statement of work. How are you going to do this? And it's different for everything. So there's no way that you can do this quickly. I mean, the only thing that we can really do so far, at least with the software that's out there, is make a compliance matrix. That's about it. I mean, I haven't seen anything yet that can do anything but what's the cage code, what's the DUNS number, what's the address, what phone numbers, that sort of thing. There isn't any common. There are a few common elements, but then the answers are generally different. That's the biggest thing. There isn't really a tool that will answer the questions for you in the federal arena. So.
Yeah, I think it's really challenging, particularly when we think about like our needs as for project management, for content management. Like I don't get me wrong, Lupio obviously one of my favorite groups of people in the world, and their project management tool is severely lacking from what I need, because I need that granularity, and I need a lot of the ability to send things to people's Google calendars. Excuse me.
You need an assistant to answer your phone. Does Lupio have
I need an assistant. I'm so sorry. I have it on Do Not Disturb. I thought, nothing's easy. So anyway, so I can't project manage in the way that I want to be able to through some of these. Whereas like RFPIO has really robust project management capabilities. And I feel like it's kind of like the Android of these softwares, right? Like you have to be really proficient at understanding what's under the hood to get the most out of it. And do I have the time to get there? Yeah, probably. Sometimes I do. But if I'm at a company where we're just trying to go, and we've got to implement, we need something with a faster and better UI. So it's really, it's like all of these balancing all of these different needs. And what I'm hearing from all of you is that we need to really figure out, and Graham put this really well, and I think we need to really lean into this, is assess the problems with your process and then go find the tool that will fix that. I love that you said it in such a succinct way, Graham. And I think that really makes a big difference. Regardless of what your SMEs are going to be doing with their time, or regardless of what inputs need to go into the system, you have to do that thorough assessment up front. Absolutely.
I almost take it one step further. I don't even, it's going to be bold. I don't think it matters what industry you're in, because I think we all know proposals. I think we have seen them. Yes, some are more complex. Some have subheadings that never end, and you didn't think there was that many letters in the alphabet. But for me, it truly is. If somebody wants like a good takeaway to talk about the great tech debate, it really comes down to what are your key pain points right now? And then if you could look at the future state of your group in the next year or two to say, we want to grow to this, or we want to be able to this much more. Does tech support that? And that's honestly for anything, but in the context of proposals, just break out your processes and see where your huge bottlenecks are and which tool will help you solve for that, as well as maybe some other ones in the future. And if anybody, I'm sure they're going to send out contact information, but I'm more than happy to talk with anybody about it. I've been doing it a long time, and it's a fun space to be in. I want to keep my career in here for another 14 years. So I'm happy to chat with anybody about it if they are running into a brick wall with their management or something like that.
Yeah, and I never thought that I would be somebody who would come into an organization and be like, we don't really need software. But in my current company, we kind of really don't need software. Like, it's a small offering. They're simple RFPs. Like, could I justify spending $10,000 on it? However much it is? Yeah, I don't think so. It's not that big of a deal. We can use Google Drive. We can use comments. It's a small team. We can execute on it quickly. So like, do I personally think tech is important for everybody to have on board at all times? Like, ask me last year, I would have said yes. Ask me today, I'm like, I don't know. Getting everybody up to speed on it doesn't seem to make much sense. Vicky, you're nodding. Has that been your experience in some places too?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest gripes, to go back and then loop it again, is that there's so many different areas in proposal management that are completely disjointed. So the software isn't going to help in every single area, and that's like a big gripe of mine, right? I can't consolidate. So there's a question about your standard content library. Well, we house ours in SharePoint, which kind of connects to what we're doing when we collaborate on our proposals and bringing that in. But it's also how I'm shredding these things is a completely different area in itself. The way that I do my project management is completely different. I just feel like they're so disjointed. So it is more of a, what's your bottleneck? What's holding you up? Whereas how does this RFE software take away 98% of my problems? Because I just don't think there's going to, because our job is kind of webs into so many different areas, right? It's not, the software is not going to really help with that. And for me personally, to go back to your question, so yes, I think we have a small team. And so I can send out a document and share it through Office and say, hey, just write up some comments, see if this is compliant, and hey, does this work for you? What we're saying in the approach, right? Take a look at this PowerPoint, and they're all connected that way. So for me to bring in like a Lupio and get everybody up to speed in that software, it wouldn't really work, for us.
Yeah, I'm seeing also in the chat right now, Sarah is asking, she's in the federal space and doesn't think most of the automated solutions make sense. What is the type of approach that we could use for setting up a content library? And Bill, are you familiar with any library tools that aren't related to RFPs? Because you answered Sarah there.
Just your regular old Teams, SharePoint, that sort of thing. Like I said in the comments, it's basically a good process, and a good. I mean, you could even. I've seen full-time curators, like I think Graham was mentioning earlier. With any of the tools, but then you need somebody to make sure all this is current, everything in it is current. So there's that, and then. As far as any automation, I don't think that's going to work. It's just a matter of something well organized, a library that you can go to really quick, good search tools, that sort of thing, to pull what you need.
But don't search proposal software. So if you're looking for, it's a good distinction. If you're looking for content management or library management, there are separate companies that do those. So if that's more effective for you rather than the digestion of a document and assignment and things like that, if you just need something better for your content, there are separate companies that do those.
Yeah, there's an organization called Shelf that I've heard of that does content management. Open Asset is one that will do your digital your photographs and your digital blueprints and plans and stuff for the AEC industry. So yeah, content management software. There's also, those emerging technologies in this space too. And as we're kind of finishing up here, talking about what the future looks like, I know some people who are creating algorithm-based search tools that can go out and crawl through your old proposals, put together a draft executive summary based on what you've written in the past using AI. I saw Graham's face. All right, tell me. tell me what, I knew I was going to get that from you. Tell me what you're thinking with that.
That hurts. I think it's fine. I'm maybe it's an old school mentality of not reusing, language or content, especially for executive summaries.
I agree.
Content you can scrub for Q&As, but you got to, if you're in this industry and you find executive summaries painful, maybe content manager is a better spot for you, but proposals, you got to find that enjoyable, because the conversations that you have organically with sales, with pre-sales, with anybody supporting them, learning your own business, researching the customer, seeing what they actually wrote versus what they want, building all that in a 1 to 2 page document, possibly with some graphics, that's a really good time. So if you don't like that, I would probably say might not be the best industry for you to be in, but I would love to, I'm open-minded. I'd love to see software that does something like that, but I have a hunch there's gonna be a lot of edits.
I personally love the idea if it can comb through things. So even though each agency is, dependent on what we need to write for them, a lot of the service areas are the same. So if I'm doing DevSecOps or I'm doing, kind of agile, and I need, an agile approach that would map back to what they're doing, if something can comb through old proposals that I've done in the past 6 to 8 months that I can kind of bring up on my own, would be great for me. We have a content library that's in SharePoint, and it stinks, right? Like you type in search and then you get like 48 tabs of something that's kind of related, but not really what you're looking for. So if there was a better tool out there that could search old proposals, I mean, that would be great for me.
Vicky, I think it's a really good idea. I think it depends on costs, because for me, if I have somebody that can multitask and say,
Fair enough. Right.
workload, can you
Right.
cleanse a proposal? I would trust probably somebody that knows our business and knows what's important versus looking for artificial intelligence to try and understand, what rhymes with orange. Like it's just
Right.
Spoiler alert, nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm a team of 1 currently right now. So
Yeah.
it would help me, kind of do an initial search, right? So I can pare it down and I can kind of look, oh, I did this for interior last year. That's kind of similar. Great. I'll pull it over, rather than me, spending 15 to 20 minutes on our content library and kind of combing through, right? Trying to remember if I did this somewhere before, right?
Yeah, it's a great use case.
I saw Bill getting animated about that. What do you think about that, Bill?
What I think is that if you're going to have something do an executive summary for you, it needs to be linked up to your win themes, strategies, and things of that nature. Your ghosting, the competition, it needs to include that. And if I ever see a company that puts, we are pleased to present, they're not getting the business. No way. It ain't happening.
I think that
but
is
seriously,
human-centered. The executive summary and the content like that has to be done by a person, teamed up with your subject matter expert and the sales who have been in that industry and have known what the pain points are, and then formulating that part of it specifically needs to be done by a human.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, in a perfect world, there would be something like that. If you're going to have an AI do it, then that's what you'd have to have, at least one element. But I totally agree with you. I mean, you've got to have a human do it right now anyway.
Yeah.
And I think really anyway, especially somebody who, like you said, who knows it well. So
What are we're coming up here on the end of our time. Lauren, what are your thoughts for the future of software?
I know. Well, it's interesting that you asked me, because I'm newer in the proposals world and I'm younger, so I'm surely going to be in it for quite some time. I think we're headed in an interesting direction. I think, especially with regards to the AI aspect, And I think it really just depends on kind of who sees what and who does what, because as Bill and Vicky mentioned, with regards to like compliance matrices and shredding of a document, I never see a requirements checklist. That's not something that I ever deal with, which is kind of interesting. And so like that wouldn't ever be useful for me. But with regards to an exec summary, I'll pump out a couple paragraphs, but the rest of it's kind of all tables and very organized chaos. So in that aspect, AI would kind of be great if they could do my tables for me, and I can write my paragraph and we're good to go. So I think it'll be interesting. I don't think the human element will ever go away, and I don't think it should, right? That's what makes kind of sales teams very good. But I think kind of, at least from my perspective, if it doesn't really matter, so long as I get a budget in front of someone else and they approve it, it's kind of the same,
Fair, absolutely fair. I think it's really interesting to close out here. We have a couple of really great comments from Sam Weaver, and we appreciate you, Sam. Thank you so much for adding this. Number one, organizational leadership has to buy in to getting that content maintained. It has to be a part, regardless of whether you're using a software, whether you're using SharePoint, whatever it is that you're doing, you have to make sure that organizational leadership gives you the time to do a good job with your content if you have a repository. Second, here we see that Sam is also in favor of AI taking over proposals. The more automated proposals go out there, the more competitive the old-fashioned human-created proposals will be. That's a spicy topic, probably for another day. I think the AI conversation is going to be one that we are going to be duking it out over for years to come. So stay tuned here in Pi. Thank you again. As we close out our hour, it has been an absolute delight to get to chat with our experts here. And this is just a small sample of the folks who are having these really responsible, really interesting conversations in Pi every day. And we're so glad to welcome you and to promote you as experts in your field. And thank you for joining us today. We will see everybody. So number one, everybody will get a recording of this. Number two, we will be sending out LinkedIn profiles if anybody wants to connect with you, or do you feel comfortable? Everybody here. All right. Everybody here is comfortable connecting on LinkedIn. If you got comments, questions, words of wisdom, don't be shy. These are big time experts in our field, and they are very interested in making sure that you're successful. So again, thank you for tackling this exciting topic with us today. We're glad to have seen you, and we'll see you all in the community at proposalindustryexperts.com. Enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.